What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Weekly Dose of Dano TV with the worldwide legendary martial artist Chuck Johnson in the building. You guys are going to want to type all of your questions for Chuck as soon as you can because we have a lot that we need to cover. And when I tell you that Chuck is going to be sharing his insights, his golden nuggets, and his philosophies on how to live our very best lives, you're not going to want to miss out on an opportunity to interview this legend. So, Chuck, what do you have to say? Or I guess I'm going to be doing the interviewing, right? To ask the questions. But Chuck, what do you have to say to everybody before we get started today?
The only thing I've really got to say is thank you guys for taking the time to tune in and for just hearing, my story and where I'm coming from and what I've got to share. Appreciate all of you guys.
Awesome, man. So like I said, you got to do whatever you got to do to raise your vibrations, whether it's liking the channel, sharing it, and typing in your questions and just bringing in your positive energy. And let's go because it's time for another episode of Weekly Dose of Dano TV. Let's get it, everybody. Hello, everybody. Like I said, this episode is going to be absolutely amazing because Chuck is not only a legendary worldwide martial artist, but he's also an action and stuntman. So, like I said, make sure you type all of your questions because this is going to be such a great opportunity for my positivity posse for you guys to get your questions and your voices heard as well. As you already know, same thing as we do every week. But like I said, we have so many great things that we need to cover, and we're going to bring Chuck on in a second. So just hold on to your horses just for a few minutes, and we're going to bring them right on. But I wanted to take a moment to talk to you guys about things that might not happen the way that we might prefer them to. So one of the things that's been happening in my life, as you guys already know, is that I'm involved in a basketball league. And man, this season has just been such a learning experience, if I can put it nicely that way. And, I would prefer for us to win more games. But, sometimes it's always not about winning. When you go out there, you need to, work on your skills or maybe a mindset or maybe run different plays and just really enjoy, or maybe even just enjoying the game, just to be out there and just to say, hey, well, I'm grateful that I'm out here and I have the physical abilities and the health abilities just to be out here. And like I said, I know it's kind of hard to do on an everyday basis. But I think in our lives, we can kind of get a little bit, down on ourselves or maybe thinking about, oh, well, why didn't this work out? And why didn't that work out? But like I said, life is really about perspective. And as you guys know, that's what we always talk about when we raise vibrations and we look at everything through a positive lens and through a positive scope. The things are going to manifest in that way as well. And as we know, I'm going to share with you guys this energy picture that I probably show at least once every other week. But here, we all know that when we're vibrating at enlightenment and peace and love and joy, then great things will start to manifest in our lives. But, let's say if we have shame for, in my situation, let's just say missing that 3-pointer or, having guilt or fear just to even go out there. All of that stuff is just going to attract negativity, and that's what we don't want in our lives. And every situation in our life does have a silver lining. It's just up to us to find it. And I don't really like the term silver lining because, I just don't feel like it's as great as of a term as like shifting our mindset or changing our paradigm to the positive sense and just really discovering what lessons that we need to learn during that time. And, maybe for me, another thing that I need to learn is to learn how to lose because I always like to win. I think everybody does. But that just might be one of the things that I needed to work on as well while I'm going through this season. So it's been absolutely amazing, and the friendships and the people that I've just played with are absolutely amazing. But sometimes you just got to learn from both perspectives, from winning and from losing. And I think a lot of people can make the argument that you learn a lot more when things aren't going the way you would prefer them to. And as we all know, we also have to make that our intention too, to say everything that always happens to us is working out for our greatest good. And, it might be saving us from something. And whatever the case may be, or how severe it is, just know that everything is working out towards our greatest good and our greatest, our best lives, if you want to call it that. So thank you guys for being here tonight. Let's go through a couple of comments. Let's go. Let's go is right. Thank you, Lou, for dropping that. Thank you for dropping the hashtag positivity. You guys are absolutely amazing out there. Thank you. I had to switch it up and try something new for today as well. Just so we can, it's a new season. We have elite guests coming on, such as Chuck Johnson, like I said, a legend in the martial arts community and the acting community as well. And I know when he's going to come on, he's going to say, oh, I'm not really that, but he's just being modest. I'm telling you, when you guys read his bio, it's just filled with absolutely amazing things as well. He just talking about, being a U.S. non-Olympic champion in Taekwondo, being former bodyguards for Sylvester Stallone and Jackie Chan. And we're going to get into all of those great stories as well. So like I said, it's time to bring Chuck onto the show. Do whatever you have to do to raise your vibrations, because Chuck is going to come on and he's going to drop some golden nuggets for us, or I should say some gold bars, because his life has been nothing short of amazing and absolutely fantastic. So everybody, like, share, do whatever you got to do. Drop some hearts, drop some fire chats and emoji, because it's time to bring Chuck Johnson onto the show. Chuck, what are you doing back there? What are you doing back there, man? Stop training everybody some fight choreography. It's time to get onto the show. Chuck, how you feeling today, man?
What's up, girl? I'm doing good. You're doing good. No complaints.
Awesome, man. And I love that too. Thank you so much, before we even get started, for being here today on Weekly Dose of Dano TV, just to share your journey, because like I said, it really hasn't been short of anything amazing, from moving all the way across the entire world to, experience a different culture, just to fight through the things that you've had to fight through throughout your lifetime. This is going to be amazing. So thank you for being here for today.
Well, thank you for having me too.
Yeah, of course. You already know, like I said, whatever I can do to help spread the positivity and raise our vibrations, that's what we're going to do to make sure that we are living our best lives. So we have a lot to talk about. So let's just jump right into it.
Yeah, man, for sure. Let's do it.
So there are so many different ways and so many different paths that you probably had in your life, whether it's influences where, you could have gone into sports, you could have gone into teaching. I guess that's a variation of what you do. But there's so many different things that you could have gone in your life to choose for your route. Why did you specifically choose martial arts?
So the reason that I got into martial arts is because, originally I'm from Detroit, and I was the kind of kid that, like, I wasn't particularly shy, but, but I was kind of an easy kid to push around. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't necessarily the kind of kid that would fight back and things like that. And then also in general, naturally I had an athletic build, but at the same time, I was also a little bit too shy for team sports. So, I mean, I don't know, team sports didn't really sit with me. Right. So, but when I was about 12 years old, I discovered Jackie Chan movies. Right. And then I was watching one of these things and I'm like, wait a minute. So somebody systemized fighting? There's like systems of fighting and there's more than one and you can learn all these different ways to fight. That's amazing. So then I just got super, super into it. It is back in like the VHS days, right? You know what I'm saying? So I'd like be pressing rewind on the button and sitting back and be like, like trying to copy everything that I was seeing on the screen. And I spent maybe like 3 years copying Jackie Chan movies off of VHS tapes. When I got into high school, at that point, by the time I was in high school, we'd actually moved out of Detroit. I was living in a suburb called Okemos. And my best friend was a Korean dude. And he was going to start Taekwondo because, Korea's from Taekwondo. It's like Korean national pride and whatnot. And he was going to bring one of my other friends to do it. And I was like, well, if y'all going to do it, I want to do it. Come on, let me try it too. So then I decided to go with him. And then 6 months later, I was the only one who was still doing it.
Wow. After
right?
6 months, you would think that they would have stuck with it a little bit
Yeah,
longer, right?
right. You would think, right? Like the guy he was bringing, he just did once, and he's like, man, it's not for me. And then my buddy, he was naturally super good, but it just kind of wasn't his thing, right? Which is another one of those like life lessons, because they say that like talent is really nothing special because people waste it every day, and he was extremely talented at that, but it just wasn't really his thing. It didn't matter to him that much. Whereas for me, I wasn't as talented as he was, but I just loved it. Like I loved it. So I was just there every single day. You know what I mean? I was there every day that this school was open, right? So, and I mean, that's what it all started from, was the fact that you know, all of a sudden I was this shy person that had this means to learn how to fight. When I wasn't naturally a fighter, but I could learn it systematically, right?
Yeah.
Um, and that was the beginning of it. And then it was just about, because I just enjoyed it and I just thought it was cool. And back then, that was in the mid '90s. In the '80s, like I think the kung fu boom, quote unquote, was in the '80s.
Mhm.
But in the '90s, this was still kind of pre-internet, so there was still like a lot of mystique around martial arts. You know what I mean? And it wasn't as common as it is today, right? So
Mhm.
all that together just made it so fascinating for me. And then because I loved it all the time, I was doing it all the time. Because I was doing it all the time, I ended up getting really, really good at it. And then about 2.5 years later, normally it takes, 3 to 5 years to get your black belt. I got mine in 2.5, purely because of the amount of training I was doing.
Wow.
And then I went to fight in the Michigan Junior Olympic State Championships less than a week after I got my black belt. And I won gold medals in everything. So I swept all the divisions. So, and then after that, I was like, that's it. I found my way. I'm going to the Olympics. You know what I mean? And I was like super excited. So I just decided that I was going to go to Korea. I was going to train. I was going to get super, super, super good, come back, go to the Olympics. And that was what got me started, was
Yeah.
that drive. Right.
And
And that,
I think
mhm.
I think that's a perfect way to kind of talk about levels to everything, because there's always different kinds of levels. And just because you may be the best at one thing in one area, I think kind of kids in sports come across this issue where, in high school they're the best of the best. And when they go to college, they're not really sure how to adapt. And then in college, let's just say football, they're the low guy on the totem pole, and then they got to work their way up. And then even then there's another level with the NFL. And even then they might not be considered the best. So can you talk about that skill gap and what you encountered, like, fighting everybody in the US versus fighting overseas when you went to go win that US title?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So basically, um, back at that time, you know, nowadays there's world and international Taekwondo champions from just all over the world. They're just from all over the world. But at that time, there was like 90% of everybody that was good was in Korea, right? Like if you wanted to be good, you just go to Korea to train. And you know, basically a US national champion at that time was well, I would say like elite fighters in the States were training with Korean high school teams. You know what I'm saying? That's the difference. Kind of like how, if you look at like, for example, like an American football team in Japan, pro football teams in Japan are about as good as American high school football teams,
Yeah.
right? It's that same kind of dynamic, right?
Hmm.
So, I went to Korea, and needless to say, I just got my tail whooped like a lot. Like I got beat up a lot, right? And it was hard, man, because at that time when I went there, there was like, who the hell is this guy, and why is he slowing us down? Because I mean, I couldn't keep up, right?
Hmm.
But if you just keep showing up day after day after day, then eventually they're like, all right, well, he's serious. And then eventually you start winning stuff. You know what I mean? And you start getting your kicks in and everything else. And then after a while, people start to respect you, even if you're still not as good as they are. Right.
Hmm.
So, and it was funny because when I was training with them, pardon my language, basically I was just getting my ass kicked all the time. So when I came home, I didn't feel like I had gotten any better. Right.
Yeah.
But then as soon as I got back, everybody was like, whoa, oh my God, look at this guy, right? Like I was way, way, way faster and just stronger. And like, that's when I could really see the gap. And
Hmm.
that's when I could see that, getting my tail whooped all the time actually really paid off, even though it was really hard at the time. Right. So, yeah, I mean, I did go on as far as I went in Taekwondo, like I mentioned it in the bio. I am a US national champion, but excuse me, but there's different levels to national champions, right?
Okay.
And in Olympic Taekwondo, the highest level is when you win national championships that are Olympic qualifying, right? I did win 2 national championships, but they weren't Olympic qualifying national championships. But the interesting thing is like once you get into that level, like the difference between, a local champion and a state champion, it's kind of big, right? And the difference
Yeah.
between the state champion and a national champion is also big.
Yeah.
But the difference between like a national champion and an international champion is like it's really small. And the difference between an international champion and like an Olympic athlete is like paper thin, right?
Wow.
So the higher you go up in those levels, the smaller the differences become. And, the bigger all the little things matter. Right.
Yeah, and it just perfectly ties into what we were talking about, earlier about always, even though you were getting your butt kicked, and as you were saying, and you didn't feel like you were getting better, just that you showing up every day is probably the hardest thing that maybe you had to encounter. And I think a lot of us feel that way. Maybe it's going to a job that we don't really want to go to, or maybe it's going to the gym even though we don't feel our best. I think the majority of the battle is showing up to everything, because I know when we are thinking about things that might not want to influence us to go to the places that we want to go, if we just shut our minds off for a second to say, hey, well, I'm going to go no matter what and nothing's going to stop me, that's when you really start to see that improvement in everything that you're going to do. Whether it's lifting more weight or getting better at martial arts, or learning more in school, whatever it is, half the battle is showing up. So thank you for sharing that. And we're going to talk a little bit about you going to Tokyo, because when I hear that, I'm like, heck no, I would never want to go there. Like, you start to, same example, you start to think about all the things that can go wrong. And I know when it comes to living in a different place, you might have faced some, experiences that weren't really in your favor. Maybe
Oh yeah,
some,
sometimes it was raw, man.
yeah,
It
well,
was really raw.
can you talk about one of those times and how you responded to that adversity? Because a lot of people say, specifically that racism is just in the US. No, it's everywhere. And you've probably
Yes, it is.
experienced, prejudice or things like that. So tell us about, one time or something that happened over there and how you answered to that adversity.
I think one of the hardest experiences that I had is that, okay, so basically, as I was saying back in the day, I was all about going to the Olympics. But one of the things that I came to realize is that there's a lot that goes into being an Olympic athlete, like a lot more than I know. That like there's sponsorships and there's financing, and then you got to find the right coach, and so it isn't even so much completely about the talent of the athlete. Is this whole like ecosystem that has to revolve around growing the athlete, and what I had was just myself, right? And nobody makes it there by themselves. You have to have the ecosystem to support your growth in order to get there. So, that being the case, by the time I was in my mid 20s or so, I started thinking like, okay, well, if I'm really, really, really going to do this Olympics thing, like I can't do anything else in my life. Like everything else has to go out the window, right? But at the same time, because of my experiences in Korea, I started traveling. I started going to foreign countries. I started learning foreign languages, and I started seeing just how much world there is out there, right? And then I thought, and I just had my eyes open to a lot of different stuff, right? So then I thought, well, do I really want to be 30 years old and only know Taekwondo? And then the answer, when I really, really thought about it, was no. Like I loved fighting, and I loved the fact that it's like chess at a million miles an hour, right?
Hmm.
So, but for me, it wasn't necessarily about winning. I just love the process, right? So, and I love the challenge, and I love the goal setting and all that other stuff. So, needless to say, by the time I was in my mid 20s, I thought, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to find a new thing to do for myself. Maybe it's time for me to find a new way. And I didn't know what that way was. So I thought, well, because of Taekwondo, I lived in Korea and I'd lived in China while I was actually in Hong Kong. So then I thought, well, my older brother thinks Japan is cool. So maybe what I could do is I could just go to Japan and just teach English for a year pay off some of this debt that I built up trying to do everything by myself, and then just kind of, I don't know, go to grad school after that at UC Berkeley, because UC Berkeley has the best collegiate taekwondo program in the country. So I could just keep going with taekwondo. So anyway, I went to Japan, and I was just kind of looking for a new wave with things, but and I found a lot of very different, interesting things to do. But anyway, getting to the story of some of the hardships. One of the things that I faced is one of those times where I was just in a real bad situation. I was very, very broke. And I got into this like kickboxing match that I wasn't necessarily in legally, I don't think. Right. And needless to say that the organization that got me into it was super shady, like super, super shady, and then like I didn't really speak Japanese. I didn't have a clear understanding what the rules were. I was bigger than my opponent. So they're like, all right, well, you need to lose like 25 pounds in 3 weeks. And I'm like, how am I going to lose 25 pounds in 3 weeks? And they're like, well, if you want to fight and you want to get paid, like that's what you got to do.
Wow.
So I spent 3 weeks. I had a friend who was a political activist, and he's like, I can show you how to do political fasts. So then I just did like a 3-week fast leading up to the fight instead of training. Right. So I lost the weight. I lost almost all of the weight. I was at like, I don't know, I was 1 or 2 pounds off, and they're like, well, you didn't make it, so we need to put you in heavier gloves, which is a thing. I mean, that's a thing in kickboxing, but I was still like, 20 pounds under my weight. Right. Like,
yeah,
in training, because I was so like skinny and everything else. But needless to say, I went in there, didn't really know how to kickbox either, because I was used to taekwondo fighting rules. Had my legs taken out in the first 20 seconds of the fight. Injured my hand training because I didn't know how to properly wrap my glove. So I didn't have my right hand either. So I was, fighting in a foreign country in a match that probably wasn't necessarily legal, as a taekwondo player who couldn't use his legs and who only had his left hand. And that's the situation I was fighting. And then I still managed to fight to a sudden death. And then they gave it to the other guy at the end. But and it was just a heartbreaking loss. Like I was, as soon as the match was over, I just went into the bathroom and just vomited my guts out, and then just sat there and just cried, bro, for a really long time. And then on top of that, the agency that brought me in, they said I didn't do a good job and they didn't pay me. So I didn't. Oh. So I never even got paid. It was just a month of absolute hell where I got, I had my legs taken out and I couldn't walk right for a while, and I had my right hand injured, and I never got paid for any of it.
Wow. And this is the thing that we're talking about, like the things that happen in our lives at that time. I bet you were thinking, what the heck am I going to do now? Or how am I going to pay off this debt and everything like that? But you just know that when you have that spirit of just always going forward and knowing that, no matter what's going to happen, you're going to be all right. Even though if you don't think that at the time, or you can't, let me not say think that, but even if you can't see it at that time, it's all going to work out for you. And look at where you're at now. So we're just gonna, all these over 100 movies and commercials and video games. Now you are a worldwide, like I said, I don't know, I'm gonna call you a worldwide legend. So I don't care what anybody else says, but we're gonna take our first commercial break, and we're gonna come back to talk about kind of the mindset and maybe energy that goes into everything as well. So remember, everybody, to like, share, and raise your vibrations, because Chuck is giving us these gold bars so we can go and take them into our own lives and just make sure that we're doing everything that we can to live our best lives. So we'll be right back after a word from our sponsors.
Texas is about keeping our families together.
God bless this organization.
that was our sponsor, It Takes a Village Housing. Thank you to It Takes a Village Housing for sponsoring Weekly Dose of Dano TV and supporting all of this great content with Chuck Johnson here, aka the worldwide legendary martial artist. And there you go. Jeanette says, "Wow, what a heartbreaking story!" But she gave you your claps as well, just to show that all the
Thank you, Jeanette.
to do.
Appreciate it.
I told you guys he was going to come with that fire. And now we're going to go into more of like the energy side of everything, because I think that's very important in anything that we might do, whether it's, having this television episode right now, or you going through, preparing for fights, and everything that you got to do. And like I said, you can throw it to anything as well. And I know sports is a big part of it too, because, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and Russell Wilson, all of these people utilize meditation in order to elevate their performance. So, Chuck, do you meditate at all, or what are some of the things that you do in order to take that your performances, whether it's on the big screen or in the martial arts, to the next level?
So basically, one of my biggest things is flow, right? I read this book a while ago. I can't remember the name of the author, but the book is called Happier, and basically the author sat down and he did kind of a lot of analytical research on what exactly it is that makes people happy, right? And one of the things that he had said is that happiness is finding flow, and that flow exists on a vector between difficulty and skill level, right? So basically, if what you're doing is too difficult, then you can't really focus on it because you get frustrated, right? But if it's too easy, you can't really focus on it because you get bored, right? So basically, with everything that you're doing, you want to set up your goals so that it's just hard enough that if you really, 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 really try and you really, 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 really focus, you can just barely pull it off, right? And then setting up challenges like that is how you find your way into flow. So, and that's what I'm all about in terms of how I create forward movement and forward energy. Is I look for I try to find things that will put me into that flow state. Meaning, I try to look out for things that would be very, very hard to do, but not impossible, right? Not impossible for me, I should say, right?
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting too, because you would think that a lot of people will want the easy route, but I guess that's why, if you are taking the easy route, you don't have that form of satisfaction, and you may, like you said, become bored, and that's why you won't try your best. So everybody out there, don't be afraid to do the hard thing or the thing that might be the most challenging, because like Chuck said, that's where you're going to find your flow. And okay, Chuck, let's just say somebody
You know what? If I could just make one other point.
Yeah.
One other interesting thing that I read as well is that people aren't actually the happiest when they achieve their goal. They're the happiest when they're in the middle of the fight and it feels like they're winning.
Really?
Like, that's when people are their happiest, right? So after you achieve the goal, it's like, yay, I did it, But when you're fighting and you're winning, like that's just that feeling right there is the happiest feeling that you can have, right? And what that means is that basically, as animals, as living things, we're hardwired to struggle and we're hardwired to fight. So you have to constantly seek out challenges and you have to get in the ring, quote unquote, with everything that you're doing. You have to make it a fight.
I love that. Now, let's try to imagine, your happiest, state of flow, and, maybe you can get into it on, a drop of a hat, or, at the snap of a finger. I know this might be a little bit difficult to really explain, but can you describe what that feeling of flow is like for you?
Basically, when you achieve flow, like you lose consciousness of yourself and you lose consciousness of time. Like you get so engrossed in what you're doing that you just forget about everything else, and you're just in you're literally in a meditative state. And you have no consciousness of yourself and you have no consciousness of time. It's one of those things where you're doing something and then you look up and you're like, oh my God, it's been 3 hours. Like, where did the time go? Or, sometimes like when you're playing sports and then afterwards you look down and you're like bleeding and you're like, when did that happen? Right.
Yeah.
And that's like, those are the kinds of things that happen when you're in flow. Right.
Wow. And it's so interesting from your perspective to think about, being a martial artist and being in the middle of the fight, and you got somebody that's trying to, I guess, hurt you or trying to take you down, and maybe whatever you want to consider it. And that's when you're gonna find your happiness. You would think that that's kind of like an oxymoron, or super ironic that when you're in that time of physical stress or maybe physical endurance, that's when you're going to find your flow, which is everybody out there needs to find their flow, and whatever it is, just don't be afraid to do it, because you never know what you might find during those great states. And Chuck, you are a head fight choreographer at the Seattle International Stunt School. Is that something that you'd like to teach to your students?
Yeah, I mean, I've been teaching at the stunt school for maybe almost a decade now, and it was the stunt school that I originally graduated from, right?
Oh
So
wow.
for me, being able to come back to this place that basically gave me my career, more so than probably anywhere else that I've trained. Being able to go back and then give back and then help out kind of the next generation of up and coming stuntmen, it's really an honor, man. Like I've been doing it almost every year, and like I just never get tired of it. It's hard, just because I mean we push them for 8 hours a day every day for like a month, and like stuff like falling downstairs and jumping off of really high platforms or buildings and lighting them on fire, and just 8 hours a day for like a month, right? And even as a teacher, like it's tiring. Right, because a lot of the stuff you're doing it with them, right? But it's just so rewarding, especially when you get to see these guys go on to have amazing careers, and just do amazing things in the world of stunts, and then a lot of them go back and then they give to the next generation, and like it's just awesome. It's a beautiful place, man. It's an incredible school, and all of the teachers there are amazing people, just kind people, good people, and all the people that come through the school. It's like you were talking about in the intro when you talk about like positivity attracting positivity, and that school is just, it's just lives, breathes, eats, and sleeps positivity, and it's incredible.
Man, and they got one of the best people for the job as well, because as Brandon said right here, he says not only is Chuck one of the kindest people, but also one of the hardest working as well. So it's amazing to see that they got the right person for the job. And a lot of people, when it comes to graduation or just school in general, they don't even think about really going back and maybe giving back. And one of the things that you just mentioned was it starts a great cycle of for the next generation, for the people to follow. Why is it that you wanted to actually go to where you graduated from to help that future generation?
Just because, I mean, I think at the end of the day, man, like, you know, the greatest thing that we can ever do is just be contributing members to society. You know what I mean? Like that's the best thing that we can do. You know what I mean? Like in Asia, the symbol for person, it looks like this. Let me see if I can do it right. Ignore the other fingers, just look at my two fingers. It looks like that, right? And the reason is because one stick can't stand without the other, is the idea. It's
Wow.
this shape like that, right? So basically, as creatures, as animals, we're social animals, right? So taking care of society is just kind of what we're hardwired to do, like at the very, very core. We're caring about our in-group, caring about our own society. We're all kind of, nowadays, we're kind of living in a world where everybody's like, well, I'm not a role model, and like I don't care about this and I don't care about that, and it's all about me. And there's a lot of that energy. But at the very, very core of what we are as creatures, we're kind of hardwired to care about everybody, right? And when you do those things to take care of the people around you, it just helps you to sleep better. You know what I mean? So, and it helps you to feel good about who you are as a person. And like it's one of those things where like a lot of people, they can't necessarily find happiness. But I mean, if you really want to be happy, then go out and do something nice for somebody else and see how that makes you feel. You know what I mean? Like when you make somebody else's day, even just something like when you give your waitress just a little bit of an extra tip, right? Or you just tell somebody like, you see somebody and you're like, I really like your sweater, man. It's a nice looking sweater. Like little things like that just give people just that little bit of positivity that they don't expect, that just reverberates throughout their whole day. And then it just comes back to you. I feel. I mean, maybe I'm just you know, a romanticist who believes in karma.
Oh, no way. I agree
Right.
with you.
I mean, I think when you do positive for other people, that positivity just comes right back around to you, you know?
100%. And if you don't believe what Chuck is saying, you just think about, have a flashback to a time where somebody made you feel great. And then, then there's your answer right there. Because a lot of people might think, well, I don't have the money to donate to something. Or it's not always about money. It's about just the actions, like you said, Chuck. I remember I did this challenge for a week. I had to give 3 people a day a compliment. And it could have been, morning, day, or night, or whatever it was. But just the fact that you're helping out those people, whether it's just saying, hey, well, you got really nice nails, or I'm going to hold the door open for you. And it doesn't matter how big or small it is. The smallest things might have the greatest impact. And I believe there's I don't know if it's a Chinese proverb, something. There was a quote from somewhere, I believe, in the Western world, and it goes, in the Eastern world, and it goes, small gift, big smile. And it really just goes to show that the smallest things that you might do might put the biggest smiles on everybody else's faces. But right now, we got to take another quick commercial break to hear another word from our sponsors. And Chuck, we're going to really get into kind of the martial arts world, and we're going to go a little bit in depth on that. So everybody, like I said, like, share, do whatever you have to do to raise your vibrations, because this has been such a great episode of Weekly Dose of Dano TV, and we want to keep the good vibes going. So let's get it. We'll be right back after a word from our commercial.
Did you know you can apply to over 50 historically black colleges and universities at the same time for only $20? You can with the Common Black College application. Hello, my name is Robert Mason. I'm the founder of the CBCA. Students around the world have completed the application and received multiple acceptance letters, financial aid packages, and scholarship offers. So visit our website at commonblackcollegeapp.com to apply now. And don't forget to pick up the book, Get Educated, The Man Behind the Common Black College Application. Thank you, and get
You can navigate the legal and emotional journey of divorce and exit a marriage the way you entered it, with mindfulness, love, and respect. Solace Divorce Mediation is a full-service law practice helping couples focus on the health and well-being of children and their forever co-parenting family. Our streamlined divorce journey offers flat fees with an estimated completion time frame of 2 to 4 months. If you or a friend need us, visit solacedivorce.com.
That was just a quick word from our sponsors. Again, thank you for that sponsor for making this all possible and letting Weekly Dose of Dano TV be the best platform for everybody to tune into, to learn more about themselves and to get inside the minds of the greatest legends available. And like I said, I have one of them here with Chuck Johnson, worldwide martial artist, actor, and stuntman. So when it comes to there's so many different fighting styles out there in the world. Like you said, there's Taekwondo, there's Hapkido, there's Aikido, there's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Do you happen to have a favorite one that, if you had to pick one, which I know it's pretty hard, but do you have a favorite one that you learned?
Yeah, Taekwondo, because I've been doing it for 30 years. So, but I mean, I think at the end of the day, like, it's just, this is what I always tell people when they ask about martial arts, right? Because every martial arts system out there, it's made by people, and people are, by nature flawed. We're all just flawed, right? So what that means is every martial arts system out there is also flawed, right? So, for example, Taekwondo is absolutely fantastic if you're on your feet, and if you have room to move. It's not so good in a really kind of crowded bar scenario, or if you end up getting taken down and you're on the ground, right? In contrast, jiu-jitsu is great, in a situation where you can get a hold of the guy and you get him on the ground. It's not so good if they've got a weapon, for example, if they got a knife, or if they're willing to bite you, or if there's more than one person. You used to get to grappling with somebody and they got a friend, they're just going to kick you in the head. You know what I mean? So, Muay Thai is also an amazing system of fighting, but the problem with Muay Thai is that it's also extremely hard on your body. So with those guys, the guys that really, really master that system, their fight careers are also extremely short. You're talking maybe 4 or 5 years. Same with MMA. So, yes, they dominate everybody at the time, but then 5 years later, they're broken. And you have to look at the consequences of head trauma over your lifetime, right? So no matter what system you do, you're going to be dealing with flaws. So what matters the most is that you just find something that you like and that you enjoy, because if you enjoy it, you're going to get good at it and you're going to stick with it and you're going to get really, really into it. Right. And
Mhm.
then you're going to master it. And once you've mastered it, then you'll have something that you can actually use. So, I mean, that's kind of, I think, what it comes down to more than anything. And then the other thing after that is that you have to find a school that you really vibe with, right? Like, so even
Mhm.
if you really like you really like the system, if the school is a toxic environment or the teacher's bad, or, there's just a lot of dudes that just want to beat everybody up or whatever, then you're not going to enjoy the training no matter how much you like the system.
Mhm.
Right. So it's kind of a balance of those two things. You may find a martial arts system that, it may not be exactly what you wanted, but, you know, the vibe at the school is so good and the people are there are so awesome that that's what's going to keep you going. As said, is the sense of community. But just whatever it is that keeps you training long enough to get good at it is what matters the most.
100%. And thank you for sharing that too. I think we can kind of equate that to when you're at a job that you don't want to work at. I used to work in the restaurant industry, and the job, obviously being a server, wasn't all that great. But when you have the people and that are there for you, and the managers that you're just cool and you're vibing with, like you said, you'll have that extra motivation to just keep going and going. And we actually have a question here, one of the comments from Mr. Muhammad,
Mhm.
and he asks, "What about Kobudo? Do you know anything about that?"
Yeah, I've got a master's rank in Kobudo too, actually. So,
Oh, wow.
so I love Kobudo. I think Kobudo is great. I love it.
So what is it? Because I'm not sure what it is. So could you describe?
Kobudo is it's the traditional Okinawan weaponry. Ko in this case is the Japanese kanji for old. So it literally means old martial art in Japanese, which is just the original weapons of Okinawa, right? Is kobudo, right? Like for example, bow, and then nunchaku, sai, kama, even boat oar as the old kobudo weapons. And I think kobudo is fascinating because, for one, it's interesting because you get insights into the things that people used to fight with a long time ago, right? It's almost kind of studying it is almost like gives you a window into history, which I think is super, super interesting, and the kinds of things that people had to fight against back then, right? It's also interesting because when you study weapons, basically you learn how to weaponize everything around you, right? So in my taekwondo school, I do actually, after black belt, I actually teach weapons as well, largely because I think you spend the first 3 years learning how to fight with your hands and your feet, and then after that you learn how to fight with literally everything else. So you know how to, if you have to, you could pick up a pin and you can fight with a pin. You can pick up a book and you can fight with a book. And a good martial artist should know how to pick up and fight with literally anything, right? So when you study this broad range of weapons, you learn all the different things, all the different ways to weaponize different um, things of different structures, or different structures of different shapes and sizes and things, right? So, for example, if you study flexible weaponry, which is like the Indonesian sarong, then if you know how to fight with a sarong, then you know how to fight with a towel, you know how to fight with a t-shirt, you know how to fight with a belt, you know how to fight with kind of those long bracelets that wrap around, you know how to fight with a rosary, you know. So,
Wow.
or if you study and then like Kali and Eskrima, and you learn how to fight with a stick, like stick fighting, sticks are everywhere. It's any kind of a blunt thing can be weaponized as a stick, right? You could, like if you have half a broomstick, you could pick that up, right? Like just, I don't know, looking around this room, just
I,
anything,
yeah, I was gonna say, I think even those paintings or those pictures that you have up there can be used to put somebody in their place, so to speak.
Yeah,
Uh,
completely. I mean, you'd be surprised how many different things you can use to really hurt somebody.
yeah.
You can weaponize anything if you understand the basic principles of how weapons work, and then the principles of where the human body is strong and where it's weak and what parts to attack. Like, it's just, martial arts are fascinating, man. Like, it's really, really fascinating.
Of course, and like everything that goes into it, whether it's the discipline and the energy and just having that experience in case you need it, Those are all important. And like I said, I actually need to get my butt into the gym as well, or the dojo or whichever you want to call it, because I was studying it for a few classes, only like 3 or 4 classes. And, I really love the school and everything that what they were teaching, but the school just ended up being a little bit too far. And after this conversation that we've had, I think that kind of reignited the spark that I need to go back. And, I've had, so many people tell me that, whether it's my brother or, other people that are very distinguished in their fields, just say that you need to learn how to defend yourself, especially now, because you rather know it and not need it than need it and not have it,
Exactly.
and it's really great as well. But I want to talk about one movie specifically. And have you ever seen? I already know you're gonna know the answer to this, or you've seen this movie. Have you ever seen the movie Ip Man?
Ip Man? Yeah, I did.
I love that movie. Now, obviously, we
Well, go ahead.
go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, Donnie Yen is he's amazing because his acting is just as good as his martial arts is, and that's very rare. Like, because you have martial arts movies where, like, you have a great actor, but their martial arts kind of like, right? Or conversely, like, where their martial arts are amazing, but then you look at their acting and you're like, yeah. But Donnie Yen, like, he's equally impressive in both. He's really amazing.
Yeah, and I brought that movie up specifically because I love I just love the movies. All of them were really good. I just think that the first two were the best ones. But anyway, we have a fight choreographer here and martial artist expert. So can you talk about how realistic? So one scene that always sticks out to me was, do you remember the scene where he was fighting to win against the 10 men so he can get the 10 bags of rice for his family?
Mm-hmm.
How realistic is Wing Chun when it comes to like taking on 10 people? Like, is that over dramatized, or do you think that with the study of Wing Chun, when you know it, that's something that you can actually accomplish in real life?
I think the thing that would make Wing Chun tricky in a multiple opponent scenario is that Wing Chun uses a lot of trapping, right? It's like boom, boom, and then you lock up their hand and then you do something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the issue with trapping is that when you trap, you're necessarily locked up with one person, right? So that's not to say that if somebody isn't extremely good at it, then they just couldn't apply it, because I mean, a lot of what martial arts is knowing this thing well enough so that you know how to overcome the weaknesses of the system itself. Like, that's what mastery of a martial art really is knowing, okay, these are the weaknesses of the system, and this is how I can get around those weaknesses in order to beat people who don't know the system. So, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I don't know the answer to that question, because that would depend on how good Ip Man really was. And I don't know, I've never fought him, never met him.
Yeah.
But maybe he could, maybe he could beat 10 people, or, maybe it was just, it's been romanticized over time, and it's become, kind of legend and whatnot, but maybe it was actually only 3 people. I don't know.
Yeah. And
I mean, generally, multiple opponent scenarios are, if you engage more than 3 people, at a time, that's usually not something that you're going to walk away from. What I mean? Just because, like, it's just, I mean, I think a good martial artist, especially a good boxer, or somebody who's a real strong kicker, could take out, 2 or 3 people. But the key is that you have to hit them with the first thing you hit them with has to break them, so that person doesn't come back.
Yeah.
So, and then you can take out multiple opponents, right? But dealing with like 10 guys at a time, unless they're just all not trained at all, right? Then, if you're extremely well trained and they have no training whatsoever, and they're not used to getting punched in the face, they're not used to the specific kinds of pain that come from being struck, then yeah, it's possible. You could just take one out, but you'd have to be taking them out. It couldn't be a thing where you're just like,
they
you
keep
engage
coming
with this
back.
guy a little while and you engage with that guy.
Yeah.
Because they'd all just be like, on you at once, right?
So it's movie magic. Thank you for crushing my dreams and telling me, it's fake, so don't believe that. No, I'm just kidding. But,
yeah, not necessarily though, because like I've said, it depends on the scenario, and if he was as good as legend says it was, I'm not going to say that he couldn't do it.
Yeah. And yeah, so we're just going to take one more quick commercial break to hear a word from our sponsors, and we're going to get into the quiet flame and what that is. So stick around, everybody. Drop your comments for Chuck and your questions, just so we understand that we are in the presence of a greatness right now, of a legend, and you can have your opportunity to have your questions heard by the legendary Chuck Johnson. So we're going to take one more quick commercial break, and we'll be right back after a word from our third sponsor. Everybody, that was our third sponsor. Thank you to our third sponsor for sponsoring Weekly Dose of Dano TV and making this all possible to spread the love, spread the happiness, and spread the positivity that we all need now more than ever. And to give us the keys to take all of these life lessons, whether it's Chuck's lessons, my lessons, or just everybody in general, so we can take them going forward, so we can really unlock our greatness that lives within each and every one of us. So Chuck, right here, you have Quiet Flames Productions. And you actually have the shirt on right now that says Quiet Flames.
Yes, I do.
There it is. Can you tell us all what that is and just give us the scoop on that?
Okay, so Quiet Flame is interesting because it actually started off as a taekwondo school. Because basically, after I got to Tokyo, I was doing a lot of weight training and I was working as a bodyguard and all this, but I wasn't doing anything with taekwondo. And I thought, you know what, like I've dedicated at that point, about probably 15 years of my life to this thing. And I thought, if I don't use it, or if I don't, keep up the skill, I'm just going to lose it all. Right. So as a function of that, I decided to start, because I didn't have a dojang. I didn't have a place to teach. So I decided to just start a martial arts YouTube channel, which I'm still running actually, which is just Chuck Johnson. And then I just started teaching online. And then I was teaching online, like I just ended up kind of developing a following that just grew and grew and grew. And then because I was in Japan at the time that the Japan YouTube studio was opening up, Japan YouTube had said, that they wanted to try and compete with, Amazon and Netflix, which were just starting at the time via YouTube Red. And they're like, well, Japan YouTube is still really tiny. We don't have any YouTubers that know how to use the studio. You've got one of the bigger YouTube channels. Even though it's an American YouTube, you're technically here. So we really want you to use this studio. And we're wondering if you would know how to produce a movie. And then at the time, I'd already had a few years of experience in, in entertainment. So then when they offered me a chance to produce a movie, I was like, yeah, I can produce a movie. It was my first time doing it, but I was like, I figured it out. So yeah. I did that. And that film was called Fist of Absinthe. And it was a collaboration between Toei and Google and Adidas. And it ended up on Amazon Prime. It's still on Amazon Prime now. The main title track ended up on like iTunes, and I won all these awards for it and whatnot. So that was the start of kind of Quiet Flame stunt team, and then also Quiet Flame, the film production company. The Taekwondo school started because basically, after teaching on YouTube, I ended up with one guy who said, hey, I'm in Tokyo too. Can I come and train with you? A guy named Dean. So then I just started teaching Dean, and I would just find a different room every week. And then I thought it'd probably be easier if I found one room. So then I had another friend, or I knew a club that used to be trained, or I knew a club that used to be operated by Japan's national team coach. He got too busy. He ended up leaving. So then this club was just left with some of the senior members, and it had dwindled down to just one or two people. So then I thought, okay, well, there's only two of you guys, and then I've got one student. So why don't we just do this thing together? Mm-hmm. So then that became using their space, that became the beginning of Quiet Flame's Taekwondo Dojang. And then those three guys ended up growing eventually into over 100 people, wow. And then after that, then, somebody said, hey, can you teach my kid? And I never taught kids before, but I'm like, all right. So then I started teaching the kid, and that kid had a really good time. So he invited his friends, and then those friends invited more friends. And then I ended up with three dojangs in the Tokyo area.
Wow.
And then basically the Taekwondo schools constitute the base of operations for what Quiet Flame is, because film is just always just up and down and up and down and up and down. And it's quite irregular and kind of unpredictable.
And it seems like it's coming back too with, Barbie coming out and Oppenheimer, and the next things that Quiet Flames has to produce. So let's talk. We only have a few minutes left, but let's talk about that, Chuck. For everybody watching, what can we expect from Quiet Flames, or maybe from you personally, with some upcoming projects?
So the biggest thing right now is I'm producing my first feature film. It's called Eastbound Traffic, and it's a story the story revolves around sex trafficking. So it's how it is that this film came to be is that would be an interview in and of itself.
Hey, we can do a part 2.
Yeah, but basically the story revolves around sex trafficking, and I wanted to create the most accurate representation of what sex trafficking is that I most humanly possibly could. So I hooked up with a anti-sex trafficking organization called the International Justice Mission. And then I had them come on as consultants to the script, so that, they would look over the script. They would tell me what was accurate, what was inaccurate. I also brought in people who had actually worked in Japan's sex industry to actually be a part of the film and be a part of the project. So
Wow.
a lot of the thing, when you watch this film, a lot of the stuff that you see happening in this film is things that actually happen to the people playing those characters in the film, which is something that I've never seen done before.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing with this film. But at my overall goal of what I would really like to do is I want to use action cinema as a way to address what I believe to be relevant social issues, right? Because I think that documentaries are amazing. Documentaries are great, but they're also kind of preaching to the choir, because you have to be interested in the topic already to want to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas everybody likes watching stuff get blown up, and everybody likes fighting, right? Like everybody loves just car chases and all that stuff, right? So basically what I'd like to do, within my lifetime is to create these action films that just address social problems, right? And that address them in a really intelligent and objective and non-preachy way, where they simply say, this is an issue that we're discussing. Here it is. Do with it what you will.
Yeah.
Right.
And,
So
yeah.
and Eastbound is my first feature attempt at that. I did another short. My first real test of it was a short film that I made called Almost There. If you do a YouTube search for Almost There martial arts short film, then you can watch it. And basically what that was a visual representation of the journey of refugees and immigrants as told completely through fight choreography. There's not a single word spoken in the film.
Wow.
Right? And that was my first attempt at thinking, okay, how can I bridge action cinema with social impact, right?
Wow.
And as a short film, it was extremely successful. I'm still getting invited to festivals over that. But this Eastbound Traffic will be my first time doing it in the form of a feature film.
Wow.
And when this one goes, then after that, then it's just going to be, every film's just going to deal with a different topic.
Absolutely amazing. So, where can people go to watch, those former films that you just mentioned?
You can watch, pretty much everything I've got, you can see on either my Instagram or on my, my YouTube, which is just Quiet Flame Productions, or just Chuck Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Almost There is up there. A lot of the fight choreography that I make is up there. So, just search YouTube, Quiet Flame or Chuck Johnson. And
there you go, everybody.
Everything that I do.
There you go. If you're interested, please go check out Chuck Johnson's work, because I'm telling you, if it's half as good as, your skills in the martial arts field, in the acting field, and in the motion capture film, you already know that it's going to be absolutely amazing, absolutely fire. So everybody, that's all the time that we have for Weekly Dose of Dano TV. Chuck, let me tell you this before you get off. If you could stay for a few minutes after, I would appreciate that as well. But thank you so much for coming on here, sharing your journey and your story with everybody, sharing our golden nuggets and your gold bars to help us, take this and go forward, and we can actually implement it in our lives. To my positivity posse, thank you so much, guys, for coming here and watching and sharing your comments and your questions. Remember, next week I have Matt Jaskell, who is a professional NASCAR driver. Yes, for the NASCAR brand. And whatever questions you want to ask him, please come back and listen to his story just to hear about the extreme sports side of everything. And it's going to be an absolutely amazing show. So everybody, Chuck, my positivity posse, thank you guys so much for being here for another episode of Weekly Dose of Dano TV. And I'll see you next week at 9:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 6 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time for another episode of Weekly Dose of Dano TV. Love you guys. Be safe. Thank you again, Chuck. And I'll see you guys next week. Peace.
My pleasure.